Ilya Sutskever, the OpenAI co-founder and former chief scientist, is leaving the company. And he posted on X on May 14th that he's leaving after almost a decade. And this was notable not only because he's leaving, but also we haven't heard from him in a while. This is like one of the first times it appears he's made a public statement on X since late 2023, right around the time when he was implicated in the failed boardroom coup against Sam Altman that removed him briefly as CEO. Now, in his announcement, he had nothing but glowing things to say about Altman and about president and co-founder Greg Brockman. Altman and Brockman also kind of returned the favor. They released their own glowing statements about Ilya on X about his departure. And now Jacob Pachaki, who worked alongside Sutskever, is replacing him as the chief scientist at the company. Now, at the same time as Ilya leaving, a lesser known researcher who worked with him, Jan Leakey, resigned as well from OpenAI. Leakey ran the super alignment team with Sutskever, which is a group working on making sure that super intelligent AI, if or when it's developed, ends up being safe, responsible, and benefits humanity. So, Paul, some high profile departures and a lot to unpack here, as well as a lot kind of left unsaid about the whole debacle. What do you make both of the actual announcement and kind of what it means for the future?
All right. Let's unpack this one for a minute. Okay, so super alignment, we covered this on episode back in July of 2023. The super alignment team of Jan Leakey and Ilya Sutskever was announced July 5th, 2023. In that post, they said, quote, "We need scientific and technical breakthroughs to steer and control AI systems much smarter than us. To solve this problem within 4 years," we're now almost 1 year into this, "we're starting a new team co-led by Ilya and Jan and dedicating 20% of the compute we've secured to date to this effort. We're looking for excellent machine learning researchers and engineers to join us. Superintelligence," continuing on, "will be the most impactful technology humanity has ever invented and could help us solve many of the world's most important problems. But the vast power of superintelligence could also be very dangerous and could lead to this disempowerment of humanity or even human extinction. While superintelligence seems far off now, we believe it could arrive this decade." Now, just quick math, this decade means within 6 years, 5.5 years now. Okay, so that was less than a year ago that we created the thing that was going to save humanity. Jan, when he left, I'll just read his thread. We'll put this in the show notes. This is May 17th. "Yesterday was my last day as head of alignment, super alignment lead, and executive at OpenAI." Now, this is after his previous tweet was, "I resigned." Now, there is a interesting thing with OpenAI before I finish reading the excerpt here from his thread, that no one ever says anything bad when they leave. There has been lots of rumors that there is a disparagement clause when they leave and they lose all their stock options, all their vested options, if they say anything bad about OpenAI. So as soon as I saw this thread start, I was like, oh, well, this might be interesting. So continue on knowing that up until this point, the assumption was if you said anything bad, you give up all of your equity and they will claw back anything that you previously had, meaning you're going to leave with nothing. Okay, so Jan continues. "It's been such a wild journey over the past approximately 3 years. My team launched the first ever reinforcement learning through human feedback LLM with InstructGPT, published the first scalable oversight on large language models, pioneered automated interpretability, meaning understanding what the models are doing, and weak to strong generalization. More exciting stuff is coming out soon," meaning they've been working on a lot of stuff that OpenAI is about to release. He continues, "I love my team. I'm so grateful for the many amazing people I got to work with, both inside and outside the super alignment team. OpenAI has so much exceptionally smart, kind, and effective talent. Stepping away from this job has been one of the hardest things I've ever done because we urgently need to figure out how to steer and control AI systems much smarter than us. I joined because I thought OpenAI would be the best place in the world to do this research. However, I have been disagreeing with OpenAI leadership about the company's core priorities for quite some time. until we finally reached a breaking point. I believe much more of our bandwidth should be spent getting ready for the next generation of models on security, monitoring, preparedness, safety, adversarial robustness, super alignment, confidentiality, societal impact, and related topics. These problems are quite hard to get right, and I'm concerned we aren't on a trajectory to get there. Over the past few months, my team has been sailing against the wind. Sometimes we were struggling for compute, despite the fact they were promised 20%, and it was getting harder and harder to get the crucial research done. Building smarter than human machines is an inherently dangerous endeavor. OpenAI is shouldering an enormous responsibility on behalf of all of humanity. But over the past years, safety, culture, and process have taken a backseat to shiny products. We are long overdue in getting incredibly serious about the implications of AGI. We must prioritize preparing for them as best we can. Only then can we ensure AGI benefits all of humanity. OpenAI must become a safety-first AGI company. To all OpenAI employees, I want to say, learn to feel the AGI. Act with the gravitas appropriate for what you're building. I believe you can ship the culture change that's needed. I am counting on you. So that was his parting shots. What does feel the AGI mean, you might ask? So we have Miles Brungage, who is at OpenAI in policy research, who tweets, what does it mean to feel the AGI? This is May 18th, the next day. I can't speak for the originator popularizer of the term, Ilya, and it's admittedly often used in somewhat tongue-in-cheek ways, but there is a serious aspect of it, which I'll try to briefly summarize for the uninitiated. Feel the AGI means refusing to forget how wild it is that AI capabilities are what they are, recognizing that there is much further to go and no obvious human-level ceiling, and taking seriously one's moral obligation to shape the outcomes of AGI as positively as we can. Now, who is not feeling the AGI? That would be Jan LeCun at Meta. So I will quickly Jan retweets Jan. So Jan, it's the same. It's spelled different. Jan, Yann, Jan LeCun, and Jan Likey, Jan is Jan Likey. Okay, so Jan LeCun retweets Jan Likey, and he says, it seems to me that before urgently figuring out how to control AI systems smarter than us, we need to have the beginning of a hint of a design for a system smarter than a house cat. Such a sense of urgency reveals an extremely distorted view of reality. No wonder the more based members of the organization seek to marginalize the superalignment group. It's as if someone had said in 1925, we urgently need to figure out how to control aircrafts that can transport hundreds of passengers at near the speed of sound over the oceans. It would have been difficult to make long-haul passenger jets safe before the turbojet was invented and before any aircraft had crossed the Atlantic nonstop. Yet we can now fly halfway around the world in complete safety. It didn't require some sort of magical recipe for safety. It took decades of careful engineering and iterative refinements. The process will be similar for intelligent systems. It will take years for them to get as smart as cats and more years to get as smart as humans, let alone smarter. Parentheses, don't confuse the superhuman knowledge accumulation and retrieval abilities of current large language models with actual intelligence. It will take years for them to be deployed and fine-tuned for efficiency and safety as they are made smarter and smarter. I pull that up because it's very important to remind people this isn't binary. There are very differing opinions from very smart industry-leading people who have completely opposing views of where we are right now in AI. There are a lot of them who share Jan Likey's opinion that this is a major problem and we are quickly approaching a point where we have to have answers. And then there are people like Jan LeCun at Meta who just don't see it that way. Just really don't think we're not far along and large language models aren't all they're cracked up to be. So I'm going to stop there for a second. Like I want to do one more segment here on a podcast I listened to with Dwarkesh, but see if you have any thoughts on anything else or anything I missed on that.
Yeah, so I think that last point is really, really important because this is one of those stories where you start to see, I think, the trends we've talked about in the past few episodes of possible let's say, societal backlash towards this idea of rampantly developing AI. Like, this is a story I got multiple texts about from friends that are not interested in this subject. And all they're seeing is the headline and starting to think some very doom and gloom thoughts. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong to think that, but the context and perspective you just offered seems like something 99% of people viewing this on the outside have any conception of. So I think
Yeah.
it's really important to note.
All right. So then one more final part, and then we'll move on to the rapid fire. So there is a dude named John Schulman who I have been following on Twitter. I think at some point I knew he was a co-founder of OpenAI. Like I must have known that at some point, but he is never talked about as a co-founder of OpenAI.
Yeah.
But he was early on, and he leads the post-training team that kind of refines these models. He led the building of ChatGPT. So, yeah, like who are, if you go into Perplexity and ChatGPT, actually, ironically, ChatGPT doesn't even recognize him as a co-founder. Like if you say, who are the co-founders of OpenAI, he's not one of the names that comes up. Perplexity got him as one of the names. So anyway, research scientist, brilliant dude. He does an interview with Dwarkesh. We've talked about the Dwarkesh podcast before. It's brilliant. It's very technical. So like you need to go deep on the technical side of this. But he does an interview with him. So, positioned as, again, he leads the post-training team at OpenAI, led the creation of ChatGPT. The podcast talks a lot about kind of where are we with these models? What are they capable of? And how important is this like post-training that you're doing, this reinforcement learning, and kind of where are the flaws today that prevent us from getting to AGI that Jan Leike is so concerned about and Ilya Sutskever is so concerned about. So I'm going to take a couple moments here and I'm just going to read you some excerpts because I think this is really important. So this is Dwarkesh asking John these questions, and I'll kind of share who's saying what. So Dwarkesh, yeah, well, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it seems like that implies right now we have models that are on a per token basis pretty smart. So again, predicting the next token. Like they may be as smart as humans on a per token basis. And the thing that prevents them from being as useful as they could be is that 5 minutes from now, so again, this is Dwarkesh, they're not going to be writing code in a way that's coherent and aligns with the broader goals. If it's the case that once you start this long horizon reinforcement learning training regime, it immediately unlocks your ability to be coherent for longer periods of time, should we be predicting something that is human level as soon as that regime is unlocked? Now, what that means is the context window. It almost goes back to the context. Like these models are super, super smart to do like a really narrow, specific thing. But if you give them a process of like 10 steps you want them to go through, and it's going to take, 5 minutes, an hour, 5 days, they start to lose their ability to stay coherent. They like forget where they were. They kind of lose track of the goal. They're not able to do what a human does and say, go do this thing over the next month and go through these 25 steps. And then we step back and it does it precisely the way you would expect like a high performing human to do. That is not what they're capable of. So Dwarkesh becomes very concerned. Like this was reminiscent of the Dario Amodei interview with Ezra Klein. So Dwarkesh starts pushing John, and you can tell, like, again, John's super smart. I don't get a sense he does a lot of these interviews. One, I've never heard of an interview with him, but that was the first indicator. Two, you could tell he was starting to get a little like shaken by the line of questioning. So, okay, so it goes on. So Dwarkesh says, or if not, then what is remaining after you plan for a year and execute projects that take that long? So he's basically saying, like, what is the limitation? Like, if you think we can get to the point where these things become coherent, like what else is there that's left before we get to AGI? So John says, yeah, it's not totally clear what we're going to see once we get that regime and how fast progress will be. So it's still uncertain. I would say I would expect there to be, I wouldn't expect everything to be immediately solved by doing this. So Dwarkesh says, do you have some intuition about right now these models can maybe act coherently for what, 5 minutes? We want them to be able to do tasks that a human would take for an hour, then a week, then a month, and so forth. To get for each of these benchmarks, is it going to just take more compute? And then it's going to follow like basic scaling laws in essence? And he said, yeah, I would say at a high level, I would agree that long horizon tasks are going to require more model intelligence to do well and are going to be more expressive to train for. So Dwarkesh says, okay, so I want to go back to this because I'm not sure I understood. Like if you have this model that is trained to be coherent for long periods of time, so if you achieve this, does that imply that unless there are other bottlenecks, which there may or may not be, by next year, could we have models that are potentially like human level in terms of acting? Like they're interacting with this as a colleague, and it's as good as interacting with a human colleague. You can tell it to do stuff and they get it done. What seems wrong with that picture? If this is the capabilities you think might be possible, that's Dwarkesh. John says, yeah, it's hard to say exactly what the deficit will be. He basically kind of goes along and says, like, we just don't know. But I would assume there's going to be something else that we're going to have to solve. It seems, and so then Dwarkesh says, so given that, like that you think you can solve the coherence thing and that you don't really know of any other obvious roadblocks, Dwarkesh says, it seems like then you should be planning for the possibility you would have AGI very soon. So John, who built ChatGPT, leads the post-training team, says, I think that would be reasonable. Dwarkesh, this is when it starts getting uncomfortable. Dwarkesh, so what's the plan? If there's no other bottleneck next year or something, you got AGI, what is the plan? And this is where John starts, like, I think, wanting the interview to end. He says, well, I would say that if AGI came way sooner than expected, we would definitely want to be careful about it. And we might want to slow down a little bit on training and deployment until we're pretty sure we know we can deal with it safely and we have pretty good handle on what it's going to do. So I think we'd have to be really careful. Dwarkesh, and what would being careful mean? Because presumably you are already careful, right? You do these evaluations before deploying. It's like, yeah, I would say maybe not training the smarter version. Basically, no idea. Like, no plan, which is what I assume the super alignment team is working. So it kind of keeps going on. He says, what are you thinking of these? What is the company doing in these scenarios? He presents some scenarios. And John says, yeah, game theory is a little tough to play all this out. But maybe it's like 2 to 3 years. Like the AGI, maybe it's in 2 to 3 years, not in 1 year. Dwarkesh says, but 2 to 3 years is still pretty soon. I do think you probably need some coordination. Like these model companies should be talking to each other. Like we should be working on this, not thinking about working on this. And so he kind of ends with, what is the plan to do? Suppose in 2 years we get to AGI and now everybody's freaking out. And so now the AI companies have paused. And now what? Like he keeps pushing them like, okay, fine, we paused. Now what do we pause? Like, what are we doing then? What would the plan be? What are we waiting until? And John says, yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. So all of that, like, one, go listen to the podcast. I think Dwarkesh is great. Two, this is why super alignment existed. It's no longer in existence at OpenAI. The team is gone. They rolled it into the other research and safety efforts. Is Jan LeCun right? And we have nothing to be worried about at all? Is everyone at OpenAI and seemingly at Google DeepMind who thinks we're within a couple years of AGI right? I have no idea, but enough really smart people who live this stuff every day and feel the AGI every day seem to think it's like a 2 to 4 year window. And it would seem to me like if it's a possibility, we should probably be having all these conversations now. And they don't seem to be doing that, or at least OpenAI appears to be redistributing resources. I don't know. It was wild. I was listening to that when I was cutting my grass, and I was just like, "Oh God."
Yeah, I mean, to your point, 2 to 4 years is literally no time at all for the capabilities and the implications we're
Right.
talking about here. So that is mind-boggling.
Yeah.